Hello, folks, and welcome to Transformed by Birth, a podcast about the rite of passage of pregnancy, birth, and new parenthood. I'm your host, Britta Bushnell, author, mythologist, childbirth educator, and an all around deep diver with a side of goofball. I'm so glad you're here. Today's episode wades into the wildly important topic of reproductive justice. So grab your comfy beverage of choice or take us along for a walk as we connect with my friend and birth world badass, Sabia Wade. Before we begin, we start the way we always do by lighting a candle. If you want to join me, please do, or just take a breath as I light mine. Today's candle is for justice. As someone who's spent years in birth work, I've come to understand that birth doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's deeply connected to systems of power, justice, and liberation that extend far beyond the delivery room. The more I've learned about reproductive justice, the more I've realized how it touches every aspect of our lives, from how we parent to how we show up in the world. Which brings me to today's conversation with my friend Sabia Wade. Sabia is a liberatory leader, executive coach, doula, and the author of the wonderful book, Birthing Liberation: How Reproductive Justice Can Set Us Free. Sabia doesn't just talk about birth work. They weave together social justice, ancestral wisdom, and regenerative practices into frameworks that transform both individuals and communities. Through their birthing advocacy doula trainings, BADT for short, and nonprofit For the Village, Sabia is reimagining what inclusive care looks like and how we can use liberatory practices to stay connected to ourselves as parents and human beings. A little personal note, Sabia and I met in 2020 during a business mastermind with Ash Robinson and Kimberly Ann Johnson. We were paired in a small cohort along with Jen Mayer of Fully Funded. Shout out to Jen.
Yes, always.
And we connected really quickly. And so in our conversation today, we're going to explore how reproductive justice connects to everything in our lives, what truly inclusive care means, and how these practices can help us navigate parenthood without losing ourselves in the process. This is a conversation about birth, yes, but it's really about freedom and justice and how we can create more of it for ourselves and future generations. Lastly, I'm going to just say that I had the privilege of attending a program last year about sex and perinatal mental health. Yes, those two things are connected. And Sabia gave a talk titled Kink, a liberating practice for parents. And whoa, folks, was it an epic talk? And we are going to explore some of that today too. So buckle up, folks. Welcome, Sabia. I'm so honored and excited to be here with you. Thank you for joining.
You, I'm always excited to share space with you. And also, personal note, when we were in our like three-way, me,
Yes.
you, and Jen, I was like, I'm gonna write this little book and I'm gonna like put it out independently. And Britta was like, no, you're not. You're going to. She was like, you need a book coach? I got you. Connected me to Nikki Vandekar. Then you were like, when you want to start looking at publishers, you're going to find someone to pay you to write this book. And honestly, if you would have never said that to me, I would have never thought that. And that's exactly what happened. So that's why you are a special part of my book journey for sure.
I am honored to, and just that's moving to hear. And I mean, it's kind of, I had people who did the same thing for me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so I think that's part of what we all do, right? Is we support each other and make sure that these voices that are so important are being heard, which
Yes.
kind of connects us in here today. Like this connects, isn't separate from the
Mm-hmm,
conversation we're having. So we're
mm-hmm.
talking about justice. We're talking about reproductive justice. Can
Yes.
you, I, it might be that that term reproductive justice for some listeners might seem like we're talking about abortion
Mm-hmm.
or access to healthcare. Like unpack that one for us a
Yes,
little bit
yes.
because
So
it's bigger than what a
it's
lot of people
bigger.
think.
It's way bigger. I mean, the 3 points when we define it is the right to have children, the right to not have children, right, by choice. And then also the ability to parent your kids in safe and sustainable communities. And I think, when we think about the right to have children, people are like, oh, birth, right? Like, okay, I got that. Like access to healthcare, those kind of things. To not have children, okay, abortion access, da da da. Even abortion access, yes, but also the choice to say, like, I want to have a hysterectomy now,
Yes.
right? Like, I want to do that now, right? And people not say, oh, well, how old and how many kids do you have?
Yeah.
Because, like,
You
I'm gonna,
might not want to do
you
that
might not
later,
want to do that.
sweetheart.
Literally, I took 10 years to get a hysterectomy. Mind you, I had like fibroids and stuff like that. But it was because at 27, when they asked me, because my quality of life was in the trash, I was like, well, maybe when I hit my 30s, I'm going to want children. I never wanted children. And then I, like, 10 years later, was like, I still didn't want children. Like, if only I had like a different version of that story around my inner knowing. But, anyways, and then you have the ability to, safely parent your children in sustainable communities, right? And so now we're talking about sustainability and safety, right? We're not talking about just physical safety, but psychological safety. We're also thinking about the water that you drink, right? We're also thinking about having access to jobs. We're also thinking about, like, there's so many things when we talk about parenting a child, because parenting a child requires taking care of the parent, right? It's not just about, do they have a daycare? Do they have diapers? It's also like, can this parent be well, right? Because if we have a parent that can be supported, 9 times out of 10, that's going to just become a domino effect, and it's going to also, become beneficial to that child. So when we think about reproductive justice, it's really everything, right? It's like when I talk about it in my book, I talk about transportation, right? Being able to get from one place to the other, right? Do you have access to that? I live in a rural community now. No, right? When we talk about different things, lactation, I live in a rural community now. There is no IBCLCs. There are no
Right.
doulas, right? So just thinking about, like, every aspect, even the way that you die, right, is also part of reproductive justice, right? When we think about, because I also, like, do death doula work, and it's like most people back in the day did not die in a hospital. We
Right.
died at home, right? But now we have a funeral industry and a death industry that makes money off of our bodies, right? It makes it impossible sometimes to even have a decent burial. So it's like reproductive justice is literally everything in between, up, down, and around. And that's why I love reproductive justice, because it was like, even though I started off my work working as a volunteer doula with incarcerated people, I didn't think about people being pregnant behind bars. I
Mhm.
also had to think about, some people are in jail. Maybe they're in jail because they killed someone. Okay, things happen. All right, I don't know. I can't speak on that. But I also
Right.
saw a lot of my clients were in there for survival work. Right, I'm trying to feed my children because I don't live in a safe community. I don't have the resources. We don't have jobs here. We don't have like these things here. So I'm doing whatever I got to do, and now I find myself in jail. Right, so it's just like, it's so all encompassing that it's just, I didn't know 10 years ago that I would, like, fall so deeply in love that, like, I'm just here to stay forever and ever, whatever forms that I do. But I really do think that if we look at it in its principles and deeply think about and navigate and implement, it can set us free.
Okay. So it's a big term.
Mhm.
It covers a lot of
If you
things.
were born, reproductive justice.
If you were born and if you are going to die, reproductive justice. So,
Mhm.
so how does understanding this broad definition of reproductive justice change the way you have done birth work,
Mhm.
new parenting work,
Mhm.
postpartum work? Like
Mhm.
how does, because you said you started off with incarcerated folks and then fell
Yeah. Deep,
into deep,
deep,
like deep, deep, deep. Sabia went deep,
deep.
folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the point where you created BADT, which I do want to talk
Mhm.
about. But
Mhm.
what how did this
Yeah.
how does it change knowing with
Well,
this expanded definition?
yeah, so when I first started in reproductive justice, I was really searching for something that felt meaningful. Like, I heard about doulas, and when I was in Philadelphia, then I moved to Massachusetts, became part of PBP, Prison Birth Project. And also at the same time, I was navigating my own health issues with having a fibroid and going to doctors, 3 doctors in 1 week. And the thing that made me fall like really deep into reproductive justice is that at the same time that I was navigating being someone who worked in hospitals, being someone who's quote unquote well spoken, being someone who understood, because I was in the medical system for years prior to this. And having to go to 3 doctors in 1 week because I knew something was wrong and people brushing me off, like not even palpating my stomach, not even doing things right. I'm like, okay, I'm dealing with these intersections of being Black, right, in this space and being ignored and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I was also working with people who were incarcerated who had a whole different story, right? And one of the things that, and some of their concerns were like, maybe I used or it's on my, I'm not using it anymore, but it's on my medical file and like I'm in prison and these are white people, right? They were they were white, they were of different ethnicities, they had different levels of privilege that I don't have. There was different, like we were the identities were all over the place in this sense, but I kept seeing us worry about the same things. That makes
Mm.
sense. Like, am I going to be okay? Is somebody going to listen to me? Like for
Yeah.
them,
Am
like,
I going to be okay? Are
yeah, am
people
I
going to
going to be able
listen
to
to
have my
me?
baby safely? Me, am I going to be able to have surgery and wake up alive? Like, right? And it was just like all these like threads were just happening, even though, right, people will look at me and say, well, you've never been incarcerated. You're not a criminal. You're not this. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm still having the same concerns. Right. And so like for me, I think having like those two different things happening, right? Me being someone who's advocating for myself and then being someone who's advocating for someone else in a whole completely different situation, but still seeing these similar threads, I was like, oh, I'm all in. I was like, I'm all in. And that progressed to me then like working with my first private client who reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm in Rhode Island. There's no one on the team, like the birth team that looks like me, right? She was a Black woman. She was like, no one looks like me. Like no one has like that cultural understanding. Like I like, yes, I'm here with my husband, but I feel like I need some more support. And I remember being like, me? Like what? Me? Like but but just seeing like these threads where it brought me back to kind of the thought around like humanity. 'Cause I think in general, it is like very important that we see each other's identities, right? And how they separate us and how it causes different issues based on those identities, right? But also I just kept seeing this thread of humanity. And I was like, oh, this applies to every place that I go and every person I work with. And one of the things that also was really important to me was learning about trauma-informed care.
Hmm.
Like that also, like one, I think because I was working in the jail, so we were going to jail, and I could tell you countless stories that have been shared with me that when people are just looking at this person, they're like, oh, they're a drug addict, right? Because that's what people do. I'm like, yeah, but this person also was an abused child.
Hmm.
This person is telling me about how they saw their mother's blood on the wall. They're telling me all these things. And if we all look at this person from this one point and have so much judgment, we're really missing the story and we're really missing an opportunity to be in some collective healing. Right. And so, like, for me, that type
That
of,
put them in a box by
yes,
just addressing the one aspect.
yes, like
And
not, not
you were doing some unpacking of what else was in that
yes.
box.
I'm like, there's so many things in this box, right? And honestly, at that time in 2015 in Massachusetts, that's when the opioid like crisis was really becoming a thing. And a lot of the people were telling me stories of like, I started opioids in the doctor's office. And I was like, so that was even different because I'm a Black person. So I'm thinking like the drug kind of epidemic that I know is a crack epidemic, right? So I'm thinking about illegal drugs on the streets, da da da, like people, right? And then I'm like, oh, your white privilege afforded you the ability to get pain medication, but with no knowledge, no awareness of what's going to do to you. Then people cutting you off when you're now addicted, and like, wow, this sounds quite parallel. However, the difference was when we talk about justice, though, right? Is yes, I wasn't in a space where people getting incarcerated, but overall, it felt like when I was thinking about this crack epidemic, especially from where I'm from, and how many people I've seen in my own family and things who are impacted by that, not having resources built, And the opioid is like, oh, here's some resources. Let's start thinking about this. Let's start thinking about that. But it's just like, it was just all these connections and
Yeah.
also these like spaces of like injustice, but also like having these stories being told to me that I felt I was honored to hear.
Mm.
Um, and me just being like, there's no escaping this. Because prior to that, I had worked with many different people. I worked with people, HIV/AIDS women, people that had who are in recovery or actively using. Like I've done so many different types of developmentally disabled people. Like any time like, I've worked with some, I'm just always that person. Once a doula, always a doula. Didn't know you were doula to prior to. That was me. But it's just like everything connects. And so I just when I walk around, I don't see anything else but reproductive justice.
It's all interconnected, and I'm my brain is back holding a thread about what you were speaking about regarding some of those differences in treatment of the crack epidemic and the or crisis and the opioid
Mhm,
crisis,
mhm.
and how so much came in to that around blame that like those who got it, who started their opioid addiction in the hospital are
Mhm,
innocent
mhm.
or somehow innocent, and those who are become
Got
addicted
it
on the
for the street.
street,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm,
are guilty. And like
mhm.
this difference of understanding and shaming
Yes.
that isn't equal.
No, and I think that shows up in birth, right? So much. Like we can talk about,
Yeah,
maternal mortality
let's go
rates.
there.
Yeah, like we talk about maternal mortality rates and we talk about, Black women, and I say women because that's generally the not you're going to hear, but Black birthing people included in that are dying generally 3 to 4 times, 2 to 3 times, depending on where you're looking. But also, if you look at like specific cities and areas, could be 10 times, could be 12 times, could be like it could be really, really high. Um, and that is also applies to Indigenous folks, Native folks. And so, like, looking at those statistics, it can be one really upsetting. But I think the thing that upset me more when I got into this work and really started to understand it more was learning that those statistics are around because of racism and discrimination at the center of it. They've done so much research around like what if we bring in more intervention sooner? So, more access to healthcare, prenatal care, more access to just all these different things. And no matter what happens, it's like, oh, it's a racism and discrimination that caused this, right? And they were like, people, there's statistics around like college educated Black
Right.
women.
The education,
Yeah,
and I've seen a bunch of
yeah, and they're
those.
like,
Yeah.
oh, people, even white people, birthing people without high school diplomas survive more than the college educated, multi-educated like Black women, right? So it's just like all these things are happening, and I'm looking at it like, oh, I'm looking at it like, okay, so what does that mean, right? And then when you look into, I believe 60% of these deaths can be prevented based on like our technology and our awareness and the things that we have. So it's not a lack of technology, it's not a lack of knowing, but it's like people. Like people have biased thinking. Some of it very obvious to them, they know where they stand. Some of it not so much, right? And like when it's obvious to me, honestly, I prefer that. Know that you don't like Black people, know that you don't like brown people, let me know and we can just move it along, right? But when it's someone that doesn't know, right, and they're acting from a place of aiming to actually be really great, aiming to have great bedside manner, but that bias is so embodied in a way that they're not aware of it, that to me is the most dangerous. But if we
Mm.
if we have that conversation, right, like then we have to talk about systems, right? Because there's doctors who have higher like there's percentages of like they have worse outcomes than others, but what is their consequence to that? Right. So like it's like, and also when we're talking about the education system for physicians, midwives, because midwives are not out of the conversation of could be hurtful, right?
Oh,
Anybody can be
absolutely.
harmful, right? Doulas can be harmful. We all can be harmful.
We
Like
all have the
yeah,
capacity to
all
do
have the
harm,
capacity for
and we
sure.
have the capacity to do good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm like, when we look at the education systems and you're like, well, they're not even being educated in a way that would make them more aware of what bias they may be holding, right? So it's just like reproductive justice, also get back to that, it's just like there's this levels conversation, right? It's not a blame of like, oh, the parent is bad. And that's one of the things I really, really can't stand. Is when they put people who are most marginalized and say, like, well, it's your fault that you're dying because you didn't go to every childbirth education class. Or it's your fault that you're dying because you have high blood pressure, right? And it's like, okay, but do they live in where do they live? Do they even have food available to them? Are they in a food desert? Are they in a place where there's only processed foods? Right? Are they in a place where they're learning about stuff? Because when I worked in a hospital, we would have people coming all the time for amputations, and I would see no education or prevention.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there's so many things that are like, we cannot blame like this individual person. We have to look at the systems and the levels in the history to say, like, oh, this is how we got to this point, and stop blaming this one person. That really shivers me timbers.
No, I mean, and that irks me, and I'm feeling some of it right now because there is
Mhm.
a lot of focus on blaming the individuals for outcomes that happen later.
Mhm.
That's kind of systemic in the overculture conversation
Mhm.
around, and I would say it's almost especially true in the perinatal period.
For sure. And I think too, like, there's so many thoughts, so I won't say all of them, but like I also think one of the things that we miss, right, is when we talk about fertility, right? People get mad or like, oh, this person shouldn't get pregnant or they should do better or whatever. I'm like, the wellness of someone's body before they actually get pregnant in itself is a whole missed conversation. Like that is a missed conversation. And if you're talking about Black and Brown Indigenous people who are weathered, right? Which whether it means like their cortisol levels are just extra high all the time. They're generally almost always running at a higher cortisol level as a baseline, right? Their body is getting weathered. Their systems, their endocrine systems, everything is being weathered before they even get pregnant.
Hmm.
Before they even get pregnant, whether it's planned or it's not planned,
And we're not
right?
even talking epigenetics. We're talking about
Exactly.
in their life,
Yeah, in their
in
current
their current
life.
lifetime, not just the,
Yeah.
we're not even talking
We're
about
not
the
talking, we didn't get to
epigenetics.
grandma and mom.
Yeah,
We didn't get to them yet.
right.
Right? We're not talking about the things that carry from each system and how we like it's just so many levels that like we cannot put blame on people
Yeah.
individually. Like, and we have to look at the different pieces. And I, for me, RJ, like reproductive justice, makes me think about those different pieces. Like, one of the principles is analyzing power systems, right? And so, when you analyze a power system, for me as a birth worker, when I got to analyze myself, it's number one, right? Who am I? What am I? How is this playing into my interaction with my client, my group, my class, whoever it is, and also like what systems are playing within the thing that we're navigating. So if we're navigating birth and we're going to a hospital, not only who's the doctor and who's the nurse, but who's the board members of this hospital system? Why are these choices this way? Why does this policy look this way? Who's making the decisions here? Are the people who are actually getting treated here, are they reflected in the leadership? Most likely no.
Most likely not. I remember a local OB who works outside of the hospital, but also in a hospital,
Mhm.
just posted recently on her Instagram a photo of the board of directors of the hospital where she usually delivers when she needs hospital setting. And it's all men, first of all, and 90% of them are white. I think there's a South Asian man, and I think there's one uh, uh, like Asian, like East Asian, and it's and I'm like, oh my God, that's it?
Yeah, it's like where's your community advisory board?
Yeah,
Like
there's no women.
where's anyone? Yeah.
There's no women. There's
People
I
of
don't think there was
color,
a
there's
single person. Yeah, black
yeah.
person. There wasn't. I mean, it was like, oh, and this is in Los Angeles. It's not like we are a
Yeah.
city without diversity,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's a city with a lot
But
of
I think that's
diversity.
also like the point too. Like, and one thing that like with our data has really helped me to understand like power systems is when I look at stuff like that, right, like that kind of situation, and I think about the organizations who are, especially when I'm working with people or I'm mentoring them or whatever I'm doing, I'm kind of like, okay, you're doing this grassroots work on the ground, and it is important. However, we got to think about what is it going to impact, right? So sometimes do grassroots campaigning or whatever you're doing on the ground because it's gonna work with the community, right? You need to really get the community involved. You need to see who the community is. However, sometimes I think that nonprofits, grassroots campaigns and stuff like they get stuck between like, how come this is not affecting the actual hospital or whatever organization they're trying to change? And I'm like, well, did you look at who's on their board? Did
Mhm.
you look who's actually in leadership? Because if you look at that, you may learn that actually they don't care about this part. You're gonna have to look, you're gonna have to make a different impact, right? So your impact may be actually maybe being more vocal about what's going wrong here in different outlets. It might have to be the news. It may have to be something that's like a bigger space, right? You're gonna have to maybe move money differently, right? That's why it's so important to think about boycotting and things like that. Like sometimes like there is a disconnect, and I try to like have more conversations about that around like we got to make sure that when we're doing whatever we're doing, we're clear about who's going to have an impact on. And also, if we're trying to impact the bigger system, what is going to impact them? Sometimes they don't care if you're outside marching. They don't care. They
Right.
simply just don't care. They're like, okay, this will be done in a week, 2 weeks, whatever. But if you take that money or you take that reputation or you take that, like you really move things in a certain way, you speak their language, which is why it's so important to be cross-educated on all this stuff, then you can get something moving and get it shaking.
So you're sparking a memory of something that I was taught early on that I'd love to unpack with you. Can we go there? So
There.
one of my teachers talked about how, and I think there's both truth and problem in what I was taught. So I was taught that in the birth room is not the place for um for um doing that social work, that you do the work with the client,
Yeah.
and then you do your social work and your
Mhm,
change work
mhm,
outside of the birth room.
mhm.
What's your take on what I was told? You
My
get
take
what I'm saying,
is,
right?
yeah, I do. I
like
do.
like there was a bifurcation of how you
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. I think that hmm, one part of me says that this person probably has some privileged identities. Because and the reason why I say that is because I feel like when I do work with clients, that is my social work as well. That is my change work as well. It's not really separate. Now, am I in the birth room chanting, "We will all be free"? No,
Right.
right? Now, am I in the birth room, talking to the doctor, telling them what they're not going to do? No, right? However, I think it is a political act and a social activism or RJ activism space to be at the side of someone, reminding them of their choices, their options, where they can pause, where they can do anything, but also reminding them that, like, hey, depending on the circumstance, we have to ask them what will happen if I refuse, because that can mean that it could be a CPS situation.
Right.
That happens all the time. Now we're talking about
Child Protective Services, y'all, if you
child
didn't know what
protective
that means.
services,
Yeah.
yes. And then also we're talking about now universal drug screening, cannabis screening for all pregnant people,
I
right? So
just saw that.
yeah, a mess. But
Oh my.
anyway,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly. Right. So you know, I think it shouldn't be radical. So let me say that. It shouldn't be radical and it shouldn't be a level activism to tell someone their options and their choices and make sure they understand things and make informed decisions. Shouldn't be. However, is right. So I think that there's really no separation, but I think how I approach it in the birth room is way different than how I approach it outside, right? Because I'm a very like big personality. I'm cursing people out all the time. I don't care, whatever. But when I'm in the space with my client, I'm trying to keep them safe,
Yeah.
right? And part of that safety means that I will be a certain way to navigate the space and make sure that they're getting out of here as safely as possible. Because remember, doulas specifically, when we're in the birth experience, especially in the hospital space, they're going to be there for postpartum. And if we take the activism in the room to a certain level, when we leave, they're now in danger because we're not going to be there 24/7, right? So it's really I think there is how you do it changes, but to
Yeah.
me, it doesn't separate.
Hmm.
But I
Yeah.
also
I
think
mean,
that's mostly
it's,
because I work with Black and brown people, right? So like, I don't have the luxury of like when I, especially in San Diego, like when I started working with more white folks and going into hospital spaces, I was like, oh, this is so different.
Mhm.
Because it was like, yes, I gave them the same education, but they don't have that speech of like statistically, for no reason at all, you could not walk out of here. Right. So
Yeah.
there's just a different
Or your
layer
baby
there,
won't go with
or
you.
your baby, right?
Yeah.
So there's a different layer there. But I think working with the clients that I generally work with, it's never separate.
Yeah. I think that's an important piece to kind of pause and highlight.
Yeah, and how we activism looks different too, right?
And
Like,
how we active and the activism that we do, what we believe in and feel
mhm,
strongly about, that we want to have activism supporting,
mhm.
might actually be counter to what it is our client wants.
Yeah, for sure, for
That
sure.
that happens too.
And
And so
that's
then
analyzing
how do
power
you dance
systems.
with that, right?
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
analyzing power systems, right? It's to know that like I would turn up right now, but my client is not going to want that.
right.
Right. And like that's not there. So how can I handle this in the way that they want me to? Because this experience should be client led at
Yeah.
all times. As long as I'm informing them on what it means and they're making a choice to whatever, then that's, and that's also the personal work of analyzing power systems within ourselves to say, like, I have an ego, because we all do. I want this person to do this and they're not.
Mhm.
How do I work on that myself? Because I'm not here to make them do something or tell them do whatever or be my way. I'm here to really support. And my support means that it continues even when things don't feel as aligned as I would like them to
For me.
for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you share like an example or like a story? It doesn't have to be a real one. Make one up if you want to,
Yeah.
of how centering justice and inclusion can actually change outcomes for families.
Yeah. Well, I think, okay. I mean, one of the other principles of reproductive justice is centering the most marginalized. And I think how that shows up in our day to day right now, honestly, there's so many different ways. I'm thinking of so many different hot
I know I probably
topics.
just flooded your brain
Yeah,
with that
there's so
question.
many
So,
there's so many hot topics, right? But I'll stick to this one because I think this is one that most people can understand. Um, I think one of the ways that shows up 5 years later, we met in 2020. We were in the middle of like COVID first coming out. It was like really wild times. Um, and one of the things that happened during that time was the disability community was like, hey, this is how we stop this. This is how we at least decrease this, right? Before it becomes a pandemic. Because I remember I actually went to Utah. My life is, listen, I was in Utah. I'm always having an experience, okay? But I went to Utah, and then the person I was with at the time, they were sick, but we didn't know anything about COVID. They kept saying, like, my cough is not going anywhere. I'm not sick anymore. I just have this cough that won't go anywhere. I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. I'm in Utah. I'm like, whatever happened, little experience. I went to California. I actually went to Palm Springs. I was supposed to go to this. I was at a conference. I was actually supposed to do a thing there. Girl, never made it. Was sick as a dog.
mm,
I was sick as a dog by myself, like to the point that I was like with my ex at the time, my partner at the time. I was like, you're gonna have to come over here because I'm not gonna be able to get on a plane by myself. Like I am so sick," and it was like 103, 104 fever, coughing. I mean, it was like bad. Like it was so bad, and I was just in this hotel room by myself and suffering, right? And then like a month, that's when we started kind of getting twinklings of like COVID, there's something going on.
mhm.
Then things got worse. And the disability community was like, hey, if y'all wash y'all hands, put on some mask, start practicing these things, we can come out of this a little bit better. Nobody wanted to listen.
Right.
Nobody wanted to listen, and people did not want to listen until it started impacting certain privileged identities. I mean, I remember being in a space that we met in, and people were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so worried about this," and I was like, "Welcome to what it feels like to be Black or brown or anything in this in this world that is always living in this type of up down whatever." But I look at that as like if we would have really listened from the beginning, right, when this was showing signs of this, and we were able to listen to the disability community who's often, not listened to, often demeaned, often minimized, right? Where could we have gone? Like, where would we be now? What would the world look like? Like, how many people would be still alive? Right? How many, like, would COVID even be a thing that we're still worrying about now, like the flu? Right? Like, it's like, what would that look like? So, for me, I think it's just many examples of like listening to marginalized communities who know about things. They know, they've been there, they've practiced it, and saying, let's listen to them. They know, they've been there, and follow through without feeling like you have to have the most money, the most this, the most that in order to be listened to. But when I tell you that COVID whipped my ass, like,
Yeah.
and I'm also disabled, but people don't look at me that way, right? They're like, you're able bodied, you're fine. I'm like, I have so many things going on. But it's just like, wow. Like, as a person who, like, and I had another time too, and it whipped my behind then, but that first time, that first version put me on my my behind. And now we have so many people suffering with long COVID,
Yep.
right? We have kids, adults, people who were up active doing everything after COVID can't do anything. Right. And I just think about like how much different that could have looked if we just listened to the disabled community who told us exactly what we needed to do.
And I think that can be extrapolated into birth rooms
Hmm.
as well,
Hmm.
around, like, I'm thinking, I'm going to just kind of
Hmm.
pull some things together here, but thinking about how the professional doula creation of the professional doula was created in part with the blessing of the institutions, hospitals, like, yes, do this, but do not advocate.
Oh yes. Oh,
Okay,
oh.
just come in and support emotionally and physically. But don't educate, don't
Hmm.
definitely don't
And that
engage in a
was not too
conversation.
far away from like it was 2019 when I started doing my racism and privilege course. And I just started looking at people's handbooks, right? I'm not going to name no organizations today. We're in a different space, a different time. However, comma, there were these organizations who were very, doing their thing. And that's at the time, like BADC had just started. And it was really like in there, like, we do not say anything against the doctor. We don't, da da da. Like, basically, like, no advocacy, that is not the place for it. And I was like, if you have the privilege to not advocate, wow, isn't that nice for you? But me, my people, and when I say my people, everybody's my people, but specifically marginalized, whether it be by race, whether it be by disability, whether it be by whatever, like, you don't have a choice. You can't just sit there and just say, okay. I mean, unless you're a really great doctor. Some of us do have them, some of us have
Yeah,
really great midwives, right? But
absolutely.
generally speaking, right, we have to question things. We have to say, well, why is this so? And what will be the impact of that? And why are we doing that? And is this urgent? And what does that mean? And I think when people hear the word advocate, right, a lot of times it has been like the connection to has been like we're yelling in a room and we're throwing things across the like and we're just going wild. And I'm like, no, advocacy in its simplest form is questioning,
Mhm.
like, hey, why is it this way, or what is it? And it just bothers me because I feel like, especially when I came into when I got out of the prison birth project and I came into like the professional doula space, I was like, oh, y'all are really weird here. um I was like, what do you mean you it's like, I was like, so if your client is being told to just go have a C-section and there's no reason for it, you just say, oh, okay, that's what we're gonna do. What are you there for? What are you there for? So it was very interesting to me coming from like this very activist based space into professional doula work and coming to San Diego and people didn't even know what reproductive justice meant. And I was like, so you've been a doula for 10 years, you don't know about RJ? You don't know about maternal mortality rates. You don't like. I was really shell shocked.
Mhm.
I was
Well,
like,
it it
I could not understand it.
so this connects for me with your
Okay.
story about COVID and the disabled community speaking, the disability community saying, "Hey, these are some things we've already figured out that you could do." It's interesting to me when I think about your background with the Prison Birth Project, then coming into birth, and you're like, hang on, and reproductive justice and communities, more marginalized communities, have always known you don't go into birth alone.
Well, you don't go to the hospital alone if you could not. You
So
know what I'm
that's what I'm
saying?
saying,
Like,
right? I make it that this is
yeah,
that
yeah,
you
like that's
don't
just
do
how
this
we exist.
alone. You
That's
go
how we
with
exist.
someone who can be your voice.
Like literally, I have like, I have been blessed to. I live on my great great grandparents' land. It's the land they bought their freedom land after being like enslaved and sharecroppers on the land and bought their own land. And I live on that land now. And I was blessed to know my great great grandmother, my great grandmother who just passed away, my nana, and my grandmother. Right, my grandmother's still alive, my mom and me, so 5 generations. And I've heard like my nana's birth story, which is my great grandmother, and my grandma Gladys as well. They all use midwives, right? There was a community midwife. That's what they did. Everybody was born by a midwife. You did your wellness care by the midwife. Also, everybody in my family, who my great uncles and great like aunts and stuff, they like we used to go in the back, pull weeds out the ground, boil them. That's how we got rid of the measles. What medication? We have that. Right? So like there's all these stories, but then it transitioned from when my great grandmother had her baby to my grandmother, and the midwife, instead of being the main provider, was in the hospital, kind of like in a doula position, right? Because that's when it started to be industrialized. Was right. My mom was born in 1968, right? So there was just like that transition. So I really get to hear the story of like how these things happen and how it shifted. And yeah, even then, like the midwife who was a community midwife who was being pushed out of that practice,
Right.
right, was still like, well, I'm going to go with you to the hospital because I need to know what's going on. So I may not be legally able to be in that role anymore. So maybe I'm transitioning to this other role. I may say that I'm just a cousin. I may say that I'm just whoever I am, but I'm there to actually make sure that things are going how they need to.
Mm. So yeah, I mean, you're also reminding me of how much uh, history and wisdom is held within community midwives. How much obstetrical knowledge came from those who practiced regularly, who saved the lives of many community members and then were deemed illegal
Mhm.
to practice.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And also how there's places still now, right? Like this space where I live right now is still under resourced as far as like having midwives. They have a hospital, but they don't have like midwifery care. They don't have like people coming around to your house and making sure I live in a rural space too, right? So like getting to the next town is not easy.
yeah. So
Right?
you're in a healthcare desert
Yeah,
space
1000%. Hmm.
where you don't have the access or the community you're in
Hmm.
doesn't have the access to a lot of those things that can actually, well, what's interesting is that it was first, some of the access to those things was embedded within the community.
It's always there.
It
Hmm.
was there. So I want to make sure that we address that piece because otherwise it sounds like, oh, it's not there now.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, you've never had it. And
It
that's
was
just
there.
bullshit.
There was so much knowledge. There was so much like knowledge, not, when it comes to midwives, herbalists, like physicians, like all different types of people were always in the space, right? Like when we talk about technology, like there was so much technology and so much knowledge of what we knew and what we followed. And those things became, less and less as industrialized systems became more of a thing. So now we're like, oh, we want to take the midwives out. Let's create all this testing, all this school so that one, they can afford it, and two, a lot of the midwives, right, they didn't have the literacy to take a super professionalized. Some of us don't have that now, right? So
Mhm.
so it's like all these things pushing them out. Then you have herbalists, right, getting pushed out because now we're talking about industrializing the land, right? People aren't farming, they're trying to move to bigger cities, they're trying to work at warehouses, they're trying to work at this, they're trying to work at that. So also it was just like, and for not enough money too, right? So like like all these, like the town that I live in used to be a really robust like railroads like town, right? But then as industrialization changed, it started to not be that anymore. So then the community got poorer and poorer and poorer, right? So it was like it's just so many levels.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, we're back talking about the interconnection of reproductive justice with so many aspects of life.
yes, 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 yes. But I love my town. I love where I live, so I
Well,
love
and
being around my own kids. So
to build a homestead on your ancestral land, I mean, that's pretty, I mean, I feel like that's connected to liberation work as well.
yes, 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 yes. It's very, it's we're in the process learning about permaculture, learning about all these things because we got to bring it back. All the things that are like, and that's really technology. Like that's really like all the things that are like people knew to grow the land, to till the land, to do the things like relearning all of that. I'm like, dang, y'all knew so much.
Well, and aren't you doing some learning in herbalism yourself?
Oh yeah, for sure in clinical herbalism because I'm like, hey, one, I want to learn how to work with plants.
Hmm.
And also like that's what my people did. We didn't have access to doctors. We couldn't go into a hospital. So like that wasn't even a thing. But also like we created wellness in relationship with plants. And so for me it's been really fun and been like a really like remembering and learning and a way to also like help people that don't always have access to certain things. And also like, yeah, it just feels in alignment, like being on the land. And I haven't put anything intentionally on my land yet, but there's so much already grows there. So just learning like what my family, I have like sassafras in the back and like that's like a really, I'm like, oh, this is what my ancestors were pulling. This is the work they were doing. Like they planted some of these seeds and I'm just like getting to enjoy them. So it's fun.
Generations later.
Yes. And
That's
people are like, oh my gosh, send that to me. So you got what on your land? I'm like, yeah, it's just grown back here. Like,
it's wild now.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wild now, but it
No.
probably is
Yeah.
like you, the seed of a generation of that plant
hmm
many, many, many moons ago. That's
Exactly.
actually, I kind of got chills and a little emotional imagining that you and the seeds of that plant are both descendants from those
Yes.
on this
And I used
land.
to go down to like where my land is my great great grandmother when she used to live there. And I was like, this is so country. Oh, this is awful. And now I live there. So there was that. It's like, because I was a city girl. I'm like, I'm from Jersey. I don't do this. And now I'm like in my backyard, like, what is this herb? What is this thing? How do we figure that out? What animal are we gonna get first? So
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is something about connecting with land that is ancestral.
mhm.
And uh, I mean, I'm thinking about a couple of years ago when I went back to the town where my mom was born, and I had never been to that town. And yet I felt a connection to this town that I had never stepped foot in before
Mhm.
because it was the land where she was born.
Yeah, and that's why I was like earlier this year when my nana passed away. And literally, I saw her the night before, and then I went to the land. Like someone told me just go home. Like after the message I was getting from her, and she died that morning. But I woke up and my mom told me, and it was like I knew because I was with her. But in front of my window, in front of my bedroom window, is the well that's been there for forever because they didn't have public water. And I
Mhm.
was looking at this well, I'm like, yo, that's crazy. Like my nana was drinking from this water. Like what kept them alive? Like that's crazy. Like in my head. So like it was just like even though like she passed away, I felt even like her energy wise, I was like, she's here. Like this is where she is, you know? So yeah, just being able to still have those spaces and literally see like the well that they drunk out of and just have all those things that I literally like right here in my hands is the ultimate gift.
Yeah, what a family legacy tapestry to be weaving.
And also, I had my great uncles and my great aunts during her funeral come back and take a picture in front of the house because my house is white, like my great great grandmother. So it was their first time being on the land since I bought the house and built it. And they grew up there as kids. They used to run around there. So, and I still have them around. So they're telling me stories like 985, 90, and they're just wild. They're all wild. But like, so I also have them just telling me all the stories of the land. And I also have videos where I asked my Nana a lot about the land and her storytelling. So it's really cool.
That is so cool. So I planted a seed at the beginning of the episode that we were going to
Mhm.
go someplace. Now it feels like a really hard
No, just
turn.
make the turn.
Like, but it's all connected,
Yeah,
right?
make the turn.
Make the turn because I had the pleasure of being at this sex and perinatal mental health
That's
conference
such
with
a good
you.
conference too. That
It
was such
was
a good,
it was such a good conference.
and that was the keynote. And I was like, y'all want me
You
in
were the
this cool ass
keynote. That's right.
conference?
And you were the keynote about kink.
Yes, my
And
favorite.
so it was Kink, a liberating practice for parents. That was the
Hmm.
title. So I remember, I mean, yes, it was you. So I was, on pins and needles and looking forward. And, we were sitting
Hmm.
next to each other prior to you going up on stage. And it
Yes.
was all that like feeling my friend
Hmm.
getting up on stage for the keynote. And it was awesome. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just because it was really, for me, there was a lot of unpacking of some ideas that feel like they're incongruous.
Yeah. Hmm.
And yet it was like, duh,
Yeah.
this connects. Sex and perinatal mental health connects. Kink and parenting and the liberating practice, it
Hmm.
connects. So, can you do a little primer of
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
of
yeah,
like kink as a
yeah,
liberating practice for parents? Like, people
yeah.
might be going, "Excuse me, Britta, Sabia, what the hell are you
Exactly.
talking about?"
Exactly. Hmm. I mean, for me, my relationship with King started when I was like 20, 21. And honestly, when I first heard about King, I was like, oh, this is for white people because it was a lack of representation, right? But what I learned through King, because people automatically, they look like 50 Shades of Grey, which is not a really good representation of kink in actuality, because it doesn't really follow the principles of kink, but entertainment, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and maybe it
however,
it helped bring it out of the shadows a little bit.
exactly,
Maybe,
exactly,
maybe, I mean, because everybody was reading it at airports and train
exactly,
stations and
exactly,
bus stops and
exactly.
school pickup.
It
So,
was
so maybe
everywhere.
it came out of the shadows a bit.
It was everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But what was missing on there was like
But it
some
was
key
missing
key
some key
elements.
parts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think, I don't mind people get introduced to kink in their ways, but it's just like how you continue in your education, right? So anyways, so kink as a liberating practice for parents was really birthed out of like my experience in kink that actually really led me to doula work. Because kink is so much about not just a sexual thing that people think all the time, but it's really about trauma healing. It's really about consent. It's really about effective and clear communication. It's really about patience. It's really about advocacy. And so when I navigated into the doula world, being a doula, my like core pieces was being a dom.
Mhm.
Right? Like being a dom and having like all types of different submissives from all different types of life that were all into different types of things and me holding space for them. Right. And so when I started working in doula work and really using those principles and just how I led, it was just like easy for me. And I use it just how I lead in life, really, to be honest. And understanding power dynamics. And so I wanted to bring that into parenting because I think that as parents, from what I know as a doula, right? 'Cause we
Mhm.
get to see it like from a view that people don't get to see, even if you don't have children yourself. I was like, there's just some things that just are not talked about enough. So I talk about what kink is. I talk about like how I got into it, but the things that the four pieces that I move into that's really important is explicit consent, honest communication, intentional care, and moving through shame.
Okay, and
Um,
those, wait, I just feel like those, we
mhm.
need to just take a breath
Yeah,
because
yeah.
those four things, that's what I remember being awed by in your
Mhm,
presentation. Those four things as a practice are really powerful for navigating healthcare systems, navigating parenthood, navigating systems,
mhm,
full stop. Can
mhm.
you say them one more time?
Yes, yes. So explicit consent, honest communication, intentional care, and moving through shame.
Mm,
And I think, there's things that can be directly linked to like parents who are like, I'm trying to have like a sexual experience. Sure, right? Like when we talk about explicit consent, I give an example of the yes, no, maybe list, right? So before I even partake in anything with the submissive, right? There's a lot of talking, there's a lot of going on, but one thing we do, if you're kinky out there, you've heard of it, is a yes, no, maybe list. And what that list is like a list of different kinks, fetishes, interests, and blank spots, whatever. And on that, the person, I say, tell my submissive, take your time, do your thing. And they put, yes, I'm into that. No, I'm into that. Maybe yes, I like to receive that. No, I don't like to receive, like whatever the mix
right.
is. And then maybe there's a maybe, right? There's like I'm curious about this with an explanation. Cause I like to explain to me every piece of this, right? That's part of the communication. But I also say like that yes, no, maybe list can be brought out of a sexual context and into everything. Right? Like, a yes or maybe list can be how you create friendships. Like, hey, what are your interests?
Yeah.
I like to do this. Is that something you're into? It can be talking to a provider. It can be and it can be talking to your kids, right? Like, hey, I was thinking today we're going to do this. Yes, no, maybe. Right? And let's explain those pieces of why you think that may or may not be, right? And sometimes the maybe might be, I'm not feeling confident today. And we learned that today, that's what we're going to focus on is your confidence,
Mm.
right? So maybe we'll do the activity we had in hand, right? But I think like that, like explicit consent and that honest communication, right, which is part of it, creates more of a consensual space. And it also shares the power, right? And it allows, especially if you know that you're because we're always in power dynamics. It doesn't matter if you don't want to be, you just always are. If you have that awareness, that especially if you're the more dominant person, right, which we are in a parent-child dynamic, which you are even in our partnerships, friendships, there's usually more of a dominant personality. It creates space for that person who may not be the most dominant person, quote unquote, to say no, right? And have space, to have dedicated space to say there's no consequence to you saying no.
Mm.
This is why we're talking about this. Because I know that you might just go along with it if I don't say something. But that explicit consent, that space to say no that is intentional can really change how we move through this.
And that I want to just kind of highlight the importance of that in a parenting role that
Hmm.
is kind of hard for some people to wrap their head around because they're like, no, I am in charge. I
Exactly.
do get to decide. Uh,
For sure.
and having conversations with our children around what's happening and their consent, their buy-in is actually really respectful parenting.
Yeah, and it teaches them, right, that there's a space for me to say no. So when that space is not given to them by other people, they identify it.
Mm,
Whoa,
yeah,
you ain't give me a space to say whether I want to, maybe don't. What right there start to realize, this is maybe a relationship or a power dynamic that is not safe for me, that I don't want to be in, or that I need to alert my parent of,
right,
right? Because I think, of course you have kids and you're like, hey, this is the thing that I have to make a choice from because I'm your parent.
right.
Right? But we also know that our kids are going to be interacting with other adults. And I think it's so important to create that space, especially around, you focus on like body and this and da da da, right? and you give them that respectful parenting that allows them to really recognize when they're not being respected and when they need to question something and need to advocate for themselves, right?
Which can be generation breaking, a
Hmm.
breaking of generational
Hmm.
conditioning
Hmm.
by
It's like the
helping them.
easy thing when people are like, why are you asking this kid if they want to give their aunt a hug? Why? Because maybe they don't want to.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't have to. That doesn't mean that they're being disrespectful. They may just say bye, auntie, and
Yeah.
call it a day. They're not in the space for it. But I think that part, right, which I've learned a lot from kink, right? Like that's my foundation for that is being able to give people space, especially people that are in a more submissive space, right? I'm a very dominant person just naturally, like, but giving other people around me, like, oh, what do you think? What are your thoughts? I'm always reflecting that back because me being a very dominant person, I can be like, oh, da, da," and I'm like, what do you think? Because sometimes I need to be checked too, right? Like
We
that's
all
also
do.
part of that's
Yeah.
part of being a boss. That's part of being a leader. That's part of being an activist. Part of being whatever. It's
And a
like,
parent.
and a parent is like you have to be asking and reflecting and sitting with a possible no, a possible maybe, and always providing that space.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so folks, there is just the tiniest little primer for how kink and parenting connect. And I'm
Mhm.
telling you, the whole thing is fabulous. One of these
I know
days
you
you
made
need
me
to
think.
record that and make it
I
available.
know.
I
I
know,
know.
just
So
another
that's
thing on
no.
your
I said that to myself. I was
Renaissance.
like,
You
uh,
are such a Renaissance human. Like you create so many things, and now I'm just suggesting another thing.
and no, I really have been saying that. Like, I have it pulled up, and I'm like, no, I really need to like do a live one because I did it there, and then I never did it live anywhere else. Like, I never really like did the thing, and I was like, oh, I'm like, I need to like bring that out and like do it.
Yeah, no, it was good. And it's a topic that is new for a
Mhm.
lot of people to hear.
Mhm.
Like it that was one of the things about that conference that was so fantastic was
Yeah,
that
for sure.
all of the topics were boundary breaking, like
Yeah,
boundary of
yeah.
expectation boundary.
And I think too, like people have to realize too with kink is like, yes, it can be sexual and it can also be not sexual at all. Like a lot of the submissive that I've had, never any sexual interactions, never any of that. I was making sure they drank their water, ate food, and did good things for themselves. Like that was me being a dom, naturally doula, right? I'm like,
Right.
did you eat? Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you like, what's going on? And like report back to me and like the reward is that like I give you your favorite candy bar, we go hang out and just go have a good time. Or it's not always so kink in itself is a lifestyle and it's not always sexual. And I think that's a really thing that people have to like move through, right? That is not always sexual. And I tell people all the time, like when I'm in spaces, especially as a black, seemingly woman in spaces who's like 5'3", I'm not the biggest thing ever like I'm in spaces that people are really asserting themselves, like, especially when I'm in my like finance world space. Like I just put on my like my dom persona because men love that. They love that. Men love a bitch, okay? But like I put that persona on in the sense of me being confident, standing tall, not letting anyone like get through my boundary.
Yeah.
People like men specifically, especially like really, high up there men who are used to people like folding, they get very interested in that. They're like, hmm? And like it's helped me.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, Sabia. So, how do people learn more from you or more about you and your work? What's the best way?
Easiest ways, sabiawade.com if you wanted to look at all the things. And then if you want to see more of the day to day, which can be chaotic and also chill and it can just it's expression of my brain. Sabia Wade on Instagram.
And then there's also if you are interested in doula work and
Yeah.
perinatal work, BADT. You want to just
Yes.
do a tiny bit
Yeah.
about BADT? Because
Yeah.
we didn't get there as much as I
I
thought
know.
we might.
It's okay. Birthing Advocacy Doula Trainings is my training organization. We've been around since 2019. We have classes when we do full spectrum reproductive justice work. We have classes from full spectrum doulas to childbirth education, to lactation education, to abortion training, to a bunch of other things. And we also
Yeah.
have free workshops, free things that we also come up. So even if you're like, I don't want to do a class right now, but we have a lot of free offerings that we give to the community. And I love BADT because it's literally just like an expression of where I think the world could be if we just let reproductive justice lead the way.
Let reproductive justice lead the way. I love it.
Mhm.
So as we come to a close, I usually like to ask one final question of my guests. So you ready for my question? Okay,
Ready.
ready. I mean, I don't want the conversation to end yet, Sabia, because you and I just have so much fun when we talk. But
Yes.
okay, here's the question is, what's one thing you feel passionately about that you want new or expectant parents to see, hear, feel, or know during this profound period of their lives? So whether they're new parents or expectant, like what do you want them to really know?
No, that's so my scientific brain is on. So I'm gonna say um clinical herbalism.
Say that
Uh
again.
clinical herbalism.
Okay.
And I'm saying that because there's all different types of herbalists, but one of the things that I think really gets lost is that when people are on medications, because a lot of pregnant people are on medications or postpartum, even beforehand, and they're like, well, then I can't do anything with herbs, right? And the thing is, you could be on medications and have herbs supporting your body. And I think about that, like, there's so many people that I would love to work with, like, in the fertility stage of
Mhm.
getting their body ready. Like, how many people can work with herbs to lower their cortisol levels, to get some systems moving before they get pregnant? Right, to so that they can really be supported and their baby can be supported in this body that's being, maintained in a better space. And postpartum, I can't say enough. Like sometimes, really honestly, some people don't have access to meds or access to certain things, and especially if you live in rural spaces or you live in, different spaces. Like, I just wish that people just knew a little bit more about what's in their backyard, as well as just also knew about more people like me who are like, hey, I want to help you in whatever you have moving or whatever you have going on. And like, you don't have to become a vegan and you don't have to become, it's like, we don't have to do any of that right now. But here's a tea, literally, that can help with your blood pressure. Here's a this that can over time help with this. Like, and it could be in complementary care to whatever medicine you're taking. So, I don't know, I'm just really into that, and I wish more people knew about that, supporting like lactation, supporting postpartum healing, like whatever it is, it can just be supported more or less by a plant or two or three.
Oh, so remember the plants, folks, and find somebody who can support you with that.
Yes,
Or
like you could be
baby.
like my partner who like, and we were like, our house is like on an acre and it was like all these like plants are growing. I mean like medicinal plants and everything. And she was like, oh, I thought they were just weeds. And I'm like, no.
Depends what your definition of a weed is.
Exactly. I was like, no, I'm like, here's common even primrose. You know what we could do? That helps with like scar tissue. That helps with like all these things after pregnancy. Like, anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Sabia, for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your heart, and for bringing us this information about what a wide range of topics actually we've covered here today. From
That's me.
reproductive justice to kink and herbalism
Welcome to
and
my brain.
yeah, we we've gone the gamut. So thank you so much for what you do and for joining me today.
You.
And thank you, listeners, for sharing this time with us. If something shared today impacted, supported, or moved you, please share this episode with a friend. I produce this podcast myself, and your support makes it possible. To show a little love for the podcast and these conversations, please follow, rate, and review. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please join us on Instagram at Transformed by Birth. I look forward to being with you again on the next episode of Transformed by Birth. Now it's time. Let's gather what we want to take away. What's a nugget or something that's sticking with you from this conversation? Bring that in with an inhale, and when you're ready, blow out your candle, or just blow out your breath as I blow out mine. Until next time, bye, friends.